The target for the remote viewing session that you are about to see is President Joe Biden. Now, there are two focuses, and they are according to time. The first focus is December of 2023. Now, we are interested in what Joe Biden is thinking about the UFO, UAP, extraterrestrial phenomenon. Given all of the disclosure stuff that's been happening with congressional hearings, we're interested in what he thinks about that issue. Is it an important issue? Is he really concerned about it? Is he worried about it? Whatever. Now, the second focus is the same person, President Joe Biden, but this time on August 22nd, 2024. Now, that's the last day of the Democratic National Convention, so if he wins the nomination, that'll be that last day. We're interested in what he knows or thinks about the UAP, UFO, extraterrestrial issue then. And then we're also interested in any type of influences that may be on him with respect to that particular issue. Okay, now, the remote viewer does not know anything about this. The remote viewer does not know the target. The remote viewer does not know anything about the project, but you know because I just told you, so you can follow along with what the remote viewer is describing when the remote viewer goes through the data that they have for the target. So, let's begin. All right, so welcome. This is Kahmia with Deep News, and just to be sure everyone understands, Kahmia, you do not know what the target is, right?
I do not.
Okay, and you had no idea what the project is about, right?
I do not.
Okay, so you'll describe your session, and then after you describe your session, I'll tell you, we'll do the target reveal, and I'll tell you what the target actually was and get your thoughts about that, okay?
Okay.
All right. So, Kahmia, why don't we start with your first flash sketch? You basically look like you have some structures there. What do you see there?
So I have a lot of like surface structures here, and then I have one non-surface structure as well. There seems to be like a lot of subjects just kind of inside the structures and on the base surface.
Looks pretty much like just an urban area as far as I'm concerned. Is that basically what you're thinking?
Yeah.
All right. So let's move over to your next page where you go into the center of the target and follow the target subject. And this is for what we call focus 1. So why don't you describe what that's about?
So on this page, I have a subject that is inside of a structure. It feels like a male subject. He looks kind of, thin in the face, narrow face, and he is completely covered. It looks like business casual attire, and he has short hair. And there's like something hard or something on its head too.
I see. Okay. All right. A narrow face and a long chin you have. Okay, and a male guy. All right. So, what do you have when you went into the subject's head, the deep mind probe?
So this subject felt very observant, and it feels like the subject was taking things in. So didn't feel like the subject was doing a whole lot of action. It just felt like the subject was kind of taking in a lot of things, maybe like listening or watching, something like that, just taking in information in their surroundings. The subject to me also felt mature in age, and they felt like very passionate as well.
Now, mature, you meant in terms of age?
Mature.
Pardon me? In terms of emotions or in terms of age? Or what?
I mean, I feel like with age comes the ability to mature your emotions too, So they just feel like they're not 18.
And you're saying here that the subject doesn't speak that much?
No, like I said, it just feels like they're observing everything and not saying a whole lot.
Okay. What about the next page where you go into focus 1, and you don't know what focus 1 is, but you go into concern 1. What is the feelings that you have about the feelings, deep mind probe for the subject A with regard to focus 1 and concern 1?
So this subject feels like their emotions are very heightened. They feel upset and angry. And there's a strong dislike inside the subject. The subject definitely wants to change like how he feels in regards to this, so he wants to change something about it so that, you know, those feelings don't affect him anymore. And he wants to just stop the concern entirely.
Yeah.
The subject doesn't seem to know a whole lot about Concern One, but they do still have negative emotions towards it.
Interesting. So he doesn't know all that much about it, and he doesn't like it. All right. Well, the next page you did the cognitive impairment scale for subject A with regard to focus 1. And just for our audience, the cognitive impairment scale is one of the procedures we use where we rank the subject with respect to any type of impairment that there could be on their mind, and that can be natural or artificial, and then also influenced by people on the outside. And so what did you feel there?
So here I felt that the subject was impaired, like it says internal brain on the artificial side. It just means that like everything feels, what did I write down? Okay. It feels like everything that's like felt low besides the artificial aspect. The artificial aspect has a strong pull and connection onto the subject. So there's some sort of mental or chemical manipulation happening with this subject.
I see. So you didn't feel much internal brain type of natural impairment, but you did feel something with respect to either drugs or some type of artificial mental something is happening. Yeah. It could be interesting. All right. When you get to the next page, you went into the deep mind probe with regard to focus 2. And focus 2 is a different time. So what did you feel there with respect to concern 1?
So at this time, I feel like the subject feels very like level-headed and more logical than emotional. And they do feel like slightly detached, like not feeling anything too deeply, you know? I also feel like the subject feels like concern 1 feels less of a big deal at this focus. So the subject still felt like generally negative towards concern 1, but it's not like as high as it was from the beginning. And at this point, it still doesn't feel like subject A knows too much about concern 1.
You also said that the subject here is feeling exhausted. Is that right? Or is that what word is that? Almost feeling?
It says unfazed.
Oh, unfazed. Okay, that's interesting. All right. Well, then let's move on to the cognitive impairment scale for the same subject, but at focus 2, which is a different time. What did you feel there?
So at this point, I was feeling like the subject feels like they think nothing is wrong or different about them. Like they've always been this person with the opinions that they have. They do not notice any impairment or influence on them. So I was feeling that there was some sort of external AI impairment. And the AI influence feels like it's keeping the subject away from highs and lows. It's like it's keeping him in one mental state. And then I deducted like a fancy Prozac because it just feels like he's on a really good, like antidepressant mood stabilizer.
So you are feeling some level of impairment on him at that point. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And in terms of natural stuff, you were not feeling much, or what?
No, it's very low. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Kahmia, are you ready to hear the target reveal, what this target was?
I'm ready.
Okay, so the target is, the person you've been looking at is Joe Biden, President Joe Biden. And focus 1 is December of 2023. So December, the end of the year 2023, when he's thinking about the UAP or UFO disclosure issue. So it's interesting, very interesting stuff you got there. You seem to suggest that he was annoyed by it. He didn't like it. He didn't want to. That was not a good thing. He didn't like it.
Yeah, definitely not a fan. Probably just another thing he had to worry about.
Yeah, he had a dozen other things to worry about, and that was a new issue that was coming in, and he just didn't want to deal with it. He was angry and upset, you said, about this issue, and wants to stop the concern entirely. Interesting. Mostly negative emotions about that. Well, concern 2, however, I'm sorry, concern 1 at focus 2. Focus 2 is during the Democratic National Convention in Chicago on the 22nd of August. That's the last day of the convention, and we don't know who's going to be nominated, but I'm assuming it's him. And the last day of the convention is saying what he was feeling at that point. So at that point, you have him a little different. He had basically unfazed. He just wasn't thinking about that. It doesn't seem like. Seems like he's detached, not thinking about that. It's not a big deal. Doesn't know what much to do about it. He's just not connected with concern 1. And concern 1, of course, is how much does Joe Biden know about the ET, UFO, UAP situation? So this whole disclosure movement that's going on, especially with the congressional hearings going on with David Grush and so on, Joe Biden just seems pretty much not too concerned about it. He's apparently talked to Chuck Schumer, the head of the Senate, about it, but he doesn't seem to be fazed by it from your stuff. He's just sort of out of the loop. It's just not on the front burner for him. Would that be an accurate characterization?
I definitely feel like he's on something else that's keeping him from, feeling deeply about it. And that's just kind of based on the information that I've found. I'm just like, it's got to be more than he just decided based on a conversation that he wasn't gonna care, or you know what I mean. It's got to be something else that's in keeping those emotions down too, based on my findings.
Yeah, you seem to suggest that something is influencing him in some respect. Keeping him away from those thoughts, and you seem to suggest it was AI, so it was some type of artificial,
some sort of something. Maybe those little mini micro robots.
Sounds like you were saying it was something from outside, something artificial.
Yeah.
Keeping him away from it. Interesting how you said it was AI, that there's some type of influence on him, keeping him just not emotionally connected to that issue, to the UAP, UFO issue.
Yeah.
Huh, that's interesting. That means that even if something really big happened, he's just thinking of other things. Is that correct?
That's what I would assume, yes.
Interesting. Especially that AI influence. Okay. An AI influence, I'm assuming, would be artificial intelligence that was transmitted telepathically or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Something kind of, could be interacting or interfering with his ability to kind of, go from here to here to here and like really care deeply about things.
Yeah, that's interesting. And of course, all of the UAP, UFO literature suggests, including David M. Jacobs' work with the professor from Temple, and John Mack's work, suggests that telepathy is a normal aspect of interactions with extraterrestrials. So if they were going to be monitoring him with regard to that issue, yeah, it would probably be done with AI doing the monitoring. All right. Kahmia, thank you very much. That was an interesting, you just dove into the head of the President of the United States.
Thanks, Mr. President.
Okay.